And welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue working on our player death. Of course, we previously set up the state that allowed us to stop input, but now let's go ahead and start working on some of the animation components for that. So I'm already in my animations folder here, and so I actually want to go to my player controller here. Now, of course, we do have a couple different things that we have set up in here, but let's go ahead and add in, of course, one more, which is going to be our death animation. And for this, we're going to do a trigger. And that's because this is going to kind of be a one and done sort of deal. We're not going to worry about coming out of the state. So let's just call this one, you can call it dying, you can call it player death. What do you call it? I'm just going to call this player death, just because I want to kind of know what that is actually referencing. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and rename this just because, I have all these other player options here, and I don't want this to be but is dead. That way you can just know that that's kind of a similar thing. And what we're going to do is create that animation by going back into our sprites. And let's go ahead and find our player. So here's the hero. And we can look to see where we might have some dead animations. And so you can, of course, look through some of the different things here. So I have, for example, right here, it looks like the hero is collapsing and then they fall over. So we have a couple different options that we can kind of comb through here. I'm just going to go ahead and choose to take a few of these. And you can do all these, or you can do just some of them, or you can even just do just the one animation. Maybe you want to just have them just instantly flat. But I want to have mine so he can kind of fall down here. So I'm going to use all of these. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new animation. And let's call this one player death. There we go. That way it matches our scheme with the other ones. And let's go ahead and drag that over to our animations folder. And you can see now we, of course, have that player death, which is, of course, matching with those other pieces there. Now, currently, this is not in here, so we're, of course, going to want to have our player death exist here in some manner. Now, we don't want to necessarily bridge this off of each of these, because you could, but that's going to be a lot of work. Instead, if you look, there's another button that's kind of floating around here, which is called Any State. And Any State says, regardless of whatever state you're in, go ahead and do this thing. So I'm just going to move it over here so it's near our player death. And I want to go ahead and make a transition that's going to go and point to player death, because remember, it's only going to go to player death, because after player death, we're done with that scene. So, one-way ticket here. And then let's go ahead and look at that animation, look at some of our settings here. We want to, of course, maybe to change some of these. Very first thing I'm going to do, of course, is change the conditions. I want to make sure that this is set to is dead. And notice we don't have any other conditions here, because remember, this is a trigger. So it says when this happens, it's just going to go ahead and execute that. And let's go ahead and take our transition duration down to 0. There, that gives us a good starting point here to work with this. And we're not going to worry about this looping because, we don't want the player constantly collapsing. Instead, they're just going to collapse once and be done. Now, let's go ahead and start working on a little bit of code. So let's pop it here into Visual Studio. And in our player death method, let's go ahead and after we set this flag that says this is false, we want to go ahead and set our animator. So let's go ahead and do our player animator. And since we're relying on a trigger here, we're actually going to set a trigger. And what triggers that? Well, remember, what is the name of that flag that we're using? That flag, of course, if we need to go back and reference it, we can. But we're just going to go ahead and put it right in. So this was is dead. Go ahead and give that a quick save. And let's go ahead and see what that does. So let's go ahead and press play. Here's our player dropping into our scene. Here comes the orb, boom, and there's our player. Just go ahead, and now, of course, he's still falling. So we still have a couple things to kind of work out there, but, of course, now we, of course, have some of the animation. Now, in order to give this a little bit more dynamicism, let's go ahead and make it so when we're hit by an enemy, we are, for example, knocked back a little bit. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to have to add a little bit more to that player death animation. So after our trigger here, let's go ahead and add in a player rigid body. And what are we going to want to do with this? Well, we're going to want to set a velocity on this so that way when we have that orb bump into us, we are moving around. So let's just go again to set velocity, and let's just go ahead and set this equal to death, what we call death movement. That sounds good. And I'm just going to go ahead and add that as another serialized field up here. So let's go ahead and add a serialized field. And I'm just going to go ahead and add this with another float. Actually, this is not a float. This is going to be actually a vector 2 because we're going to want to have this represent a movement. Let's go ahead and name this, which of course is our death movement. And we're going to set it equal to a new, let's do a new vector 2. And instead of 0, 0, let's go ahead and make this, just for some starting values, we'll make this about 2F and 2F. Just to give something to the player to move around. And we, of course, can adjust that with our serialized field to find the right value that we want to happen. Back over in Unity, we can test this. Remember, we start with 2 and 2, but we can adjust that to however we want that to be. So here's my player dropping in, and here he is going to go ahead and touch that orb, boop, and there he goes. All right, so that gives a good starting point here for how that's going to work. And of course, you can adjust this around, so if you want that player maybe to move a lot more in the Y direction, so let's just say, let's make that, have him go 20, just to see that how much more of an effect that is, so you can just watch that. I'm just going to drop him in again. Have the orb hit that, boom, and you can see much more dynamic effect. So again, you can play around with those values to find something that works for you, but that, of course, is going to give us just another little bit of flavor that we can have for that player there.